So we're in the midst of transforming our energy system. And we're transforming our energy system because it's an imperative. It's an imperative to do it to combat climate change. It's an imperative to reduce our reliance on volatile fuels. It's an imperative to build more resilience, to build more sustainability. It's an imperative so that we can create a more equitable energy future. Now, in Massachusetts, we're tackling this head on. We're tackling this through the creation of a new office, Office of Energy Transformation, that I have the privilege to lead. And we're tackling this holistically. We're tackling this together. And I'm really excited. I'm excited because it's a first in the nation. And I'm excited to be here to share with all of you what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I'm excited because this is my first TED Talk. And so when I told people I was giving a TED Talk, I got a lot of advice. I was told that I needed to be profound, provocative, to be bold. I was told that I needed to impart some practical knowledge, to have a call to action. I was told to tell a story and to make it compelling and inspiring. I was told to tell a joke, and I was told that I should quote some really smart people. So all of this was all really great advice. And I took all of this in, and I created today's talk. And then as I was doing that, I was thinking, this is a lot like creating the Office of Energy Transformation. This is a lot like the energy transformation. Multiple perspectives, multiple ideas, inputs on how we're going to move forward, how are we going to do this, what is the system like today, how it's working or how it's not, what we need to do, how quickly we can go forward. And it was great thinking about this. But unlike putting this talk together, where I took all the advice in and I created it myself, transforming the energy system is not something any one person can do alone. It's a collective effort. It's going to take all of us working together. It's going to take people listening, people learning, and people acting. And so that's where we are. That's the path forward. That's how we're going to get here in Massachusetts. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to do that. And I'm going to start with the provocative, the bold, the profound. So recently, Environment Energy Secretary Rebecca Tepper, she made an observation. She said that the solutions, the ideas, and the innovations needed to transform our energy system equitably and affordably and sustainably, that they exist today. So let that sink in for a moment. It's a profound statement, right? We have what we need to achieve net zero emissions, to drive down climate pollution. So what's the issue? If we have what we need, we have the technology, why aren't we there yet? Well, she then made another observation. She said that the challenge is to stay focused on the urgency of the moment and to find a consensus path forward. And so that's really what the crux is. When she said that, that's what struck me. That is really the core of change management. That's what we're doing. We're transforming an energy ecosystem. We're transforming a system that's been around for 100 years and has operated the same way, pretty much 100 years. And we're making a massive transformation, a transformation of something that we all rely on, we all have a relationship with, that we all use in different ways, that we all understand in different ways. And making that kind of change management, that transformative change, it requires working together. It requires people coming together and finding that consensus. So why is this so hard? It's so hard because we all have a different relationship, a different perspective on energy. It's impacted by our income. It's impacted by where we live. It's impacted by the water we drink, the air we breathe, community that we live in. It's impacted whether or not we get our livelihood from the energy system. It's impacted by our business. It's impacted by whether or not we actually really want to make choices about our energy future. We all have a different relationship, all have a different perspective on it. And that's important. But for something that we all rely on, most of us don't know a lot about it. We don't know a lot about how it functions. We don't know a lot about how the energy that's produced gets to us, how we use it. But we all have an opinion on it. We all have an opinion on how we think it works, on how we think it has to change, on how we think it has to evolve. And that brings me to the joke portion. I think this joke really kind of encapsulated it for me. If it weren't for electricity, we'd be watching TV in the dark. And when you think about it, right, we all know what energy does for us. We all understand that. But sometimes we just don't understand how it works, how it gets there, how we have to change it. And that's what we're going to be working on. If you think about it, the average person, I read the statistic once, the average person thinks about their electricity service about 9 seconds a month. 9 seconds. That's not a lot of time. You're not going to go very deep in 9 seconds. But back to we all have a different relationship, different perspective. Some people think about it a lot more. If you have to make a decision every month about whether you're going to pay your electric bill or you're going to buy food and medicine for your family, you think about it a lot more. If you're an energy-intensive business and you rely on it, you need 24/7, 365 power, 100% of the time, and you need it at the lowest cost, you think about it a lot more than 9 seconds. If you're someone in the industry, if you're a worker, you rely on your livelihood for your family from the energy system, you think about it a lot more. And if you're that family actually that lives next door to a piece of energy infrastructure, you think about it. You think about it differently. You have a different relationship with it. You have a different perspective. And that's what makes change management so hard. That's what makes making this transformation really complicated and really complex. So we have to work through it. We have to build a basic understanding of how the energy system works. So here's where we impart some practical knowledge. When you think about it, the energy system, it's operated the same way for 100 years, and it's done so really well. And basically, the way it was built and what it was built to do was built to take electricity generated at big power plants and move that electricity along a series of wires to your homes and businesses where everyone used it in pretty predictable ways. One-way flow of power, that's how it's worked. That's how it's worked for 100 years, and that's how it's been working. And everybody's built their lives around this. But that's changing, and it's being upended. It's being upended for that imperative to combat climate change. And we have to combat climate change because we're seeing the impacts today. We are literally seeing the impacts today in Florida. There's about 4 million people that don't have power. We have to change it because we saw the impacts close to home. We saw what happened in North Adams, what happened in Clarksburg, what happened in Leominster. We have to act. And the good news is we're acting. As the Secretary said, we have technologies. We have technologies that are helping us change the way that we're producing energy. We have technologies to move that energy more efficiently to homes and businesses. We have the technologies. We have the processes, the products, to have customers use energy differently, to be more efficient in how they use it, to make choices about how they use it, when they use it. This is all really great, but it's happening really fast. It's accelerating, and it's accelerating at a really rapid pace, and it has to even move faster. So how are we going to get there? What are we going to do? How are we going to make sure that as we move through this, back to the relationship we all have with it, that we're bringing everybody along and that we're doing it in a way that's going to be sustainable, that's going to be equitable, that's going to work for everyone? And so that's the core of change management. That's how we're going to move through it. And that's what this office is really focused on. So there's a gentleman named Dr. John Cotter. Some of you might be familiar with him. He's an internationally renowned expert in change management. And he's created a framework, an 8-step process. And I've adapted that a bit here. But that's the approach we're taking here in Massachusetts. We are working through our framework and creating a process by which we're bringing everybody along. First, you have to start with a sense of urgency. And I think we've got that sense of urgency. We have to start with a vision. Then you have to have an aligned understanding among everybody about where we are, how it works. Then you have to move through that to a commitment, making a shared commitment to make that change and make it happen. And then align around an approach. What's the step? How are we going to move through it? And then finally, a collective action, taking that collective action and then starting all over again. And that's what we're doing. That's the framework that we've created, and that's how we're going to move through it in Massachusetts. And so what's the step? What's the process? First is creating that shared understanding how the system works and how it's connected and how it's not. And it really is a very interconnected system. Dr. Carl Zekala of the Center for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Technologies, he once called the energy system the most complicated, complex machine that exists, and particularly the electric grid. Because when you pull it apart, when you pull on different pieces of it, you create a ripple effect. If you make a change in one part, then you might have to make a change in another. And so let's take an example for that. Technology. We know that we have the technologies and that we're going to have to change those technologies. Process. We know we have the processes. We're going to have to change those processes. Then we have people. And this is how change management works. Technology, process, people. We usually start with the technology, right? We start with that bright, shiny toy. We want to run to the solution. That's really the exciting part. But if you do that, sometimes you miss the people part. You miss the part of how it's going to work, how you're going to bring the people along, how are you going to make that technology work, how are you going to change the processes. So that's what we're really focused on. We're going to be focusing on the people. We're going to be focusing on how we bring people together to make that change. So let's think about that as an example of a coal plant. Now, we might want to replace this coal plant. It creates a lot of pollution in the community, and it creates a lot of global warming pollution. So we want to change it. And we want to replace it with solar, with storage, with battery. This is great. We have the technology. So logically, we would just take down that coal plant. We would put those new sources exactly where that coal plant is. And we might be able to do that. But this is where the interconnected nature of the system comes into play. This is why we have to understand how the system works today, how it was built. Because where that coal plant is, the sun might not shine. So you might not have enough solarity. Or the wind might not blow often enough or intensely enough. Or you might not have enough land to really put enough batteries that you need to create the storage that you need. So you've got to change. You've got to adapt. It means you might have to find new land. It means you have to engage a new community to site those new assets and get them to come along with it. It means that then you have to build the infrastructure to connect these new assets to where the people are, where they're using the electricity. And it means that you need the workforce, right? You need people that are trained, that know how to build these assets, operate, maintain them, and they may not be where you're going to put them. This is what we're going through. It's really human nature to want to rush to the end, right? To go to the solution, to say, I can raise my hand, I have the technology, I know how to get there. But that's not how we're going to get there. That's not how it's going to work. So we need to figure out a better way of getting there. And so this comes to the story part. That's what we did. So we created what's known as the Energy Transformation Advisory Board. And it's an advisory board that's really representative of the entire energy ecosystem here in Massachusetts. We have labor unions and we have utility executives. We've got renewable energy companies, storage companies, financial institutions, venture capital. We've got community organizers. We've got environmental justice advocates, consumer advocates, hospitals, universities, manufacturers. And we brought them all together. And we had this meeting about a week ago. And I know a story about a meeting might not be that compelling, but hang with me here for a minute. We had this meeting. And it was remarkable because we had all these people come into a room and there was an excitement. There was an excitement because it was the first time some of them had been in a room together. It was the first time that they were going to be maybe engaging together on these issues. And they knew that the task ahead of them was daunting, but also exciting. And that the rewards for coming out the other end are going to be transformative. And so they came together. And what was remarkable was that they aligned. They aligned around some tangible things that are going to be very transformative and have real impacts. So the first thing they aligned around was that we're going to work towards reducing our reliance on a major piece of fossil fuel infrastructure in eastern Massachusetts. And it's a piece of infrastructure that provides 10% of our gas needs on the most extreme weather days. It's pretty transformative. It's pretty intense challenge. The other thing that they agreed on was that we are going to reduce our demand for electricity on those hottest and coldest days. And that residual electricity, we're going to look at ways to decarbonize how we meet that. And they agreed that we need to do this affordably and equitably, that we need to look at alternative ways of how we're going to pay for this so that we can move through this transition and do it sustainably and make sure that it works for everyone. This was pretty historic consensus to have all these people come together and recognize that this is what we're going to do. And at the same time, they didn't just rush to a solution. Like I said, these were pretty smart people, a lot of experts, a lot of expertise, a lot of perspectives, and each one of them probably could have figured out a way to address this challenge on their own, to really make the change. But they recognized that to be sustainable, they had to do it together. So instead of running towards a technology solution, sort of running to the end of the story, they actually ran to a process. And they ran to a process that put people in the middle. They ran to a process that is really aligned around effective change management. And that's what we're doing. So they decided that what we really needed to do was we needed to gain a baseline level of understanding. And we needed to align around that. We needed to commit to working together. We needed to create a shared approach of how we're going to identify and evaluate the solutions, the alternatives. And then we needed to commit to working together to advance recommendations, to advance the solutions, and to communicating that into our networks, into our organizations, into our communities to explain the why we're doing it, and to be open to evolving, to changing, that if it's not working, we're going to iterate and we're going to figure this out. And that's how we're going to work through the transformative change. But the other, I think, most interesting part was, even though we had a lot of expertise in that room, there was a recognition that not every voice was there. Not everyone was there. And back to the fact that we all rely on this energy system. We all have a relationship with it. we all use it, we all pay for it, that everyone probably has a perspective and that we needed to go out and engage more people. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to bring more people into the conversation, and this is the call to action. This is where all of you come in. We need the ideas and the input. And one of the things that we're focused on, one of these focus areas, is around reducing our reliance on fossil fuel-fired power plants, like the one that's literally around the corner here in Pittsfield. That's one of the projects that we're going to be working on. How do we reduce our reliance on this plant? How do we reimagine it? How do we reimagine what we can do? What's the vision for that plant? Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people in this room and in Pittsfield that have ideas about that, and they're all really important ideas. And as we think through those ideas and how to implement them, we have to go back to that understanding of how does this plant operate today? What does it do? How does it work? Who does it serve? How does it serve them? How is it compensated? And who does it compensate? We have to think through it methodically to understand what we can do and how we can get there. And we have to do that together. And so that's how we're going to do it in Massachusetts. That's what transformation is all about. It's about being intentional. It's about being inclusive. And it's about engaging everyone and making sure that you put people at the center of the process. Thank you.